My name is Emily Debenham. I have degrees in Latin and history teaching, and I am a writer, and I like to collect Latin quotes. It's one of my hobbies for the last couple of years, and I think it is a really fun way to kind of foster an interest in the ancient world. However, sometimes this is not a perfect way to be introduced to the ancient world, because sometimes quotes are taken out of context. And I wrote an essay about this last week, and I decided I'm going to try to do a video essay and see how it goes. And the quote I want to discuss today is Oderint dum metuant. And this quote, translated into English, I'm pretty sure a lot of people have heard it because it's super popular, and it has been super popular since it was introduced to audiences in ancient Rome. The translation is, "Let them hate me so long as they fear me." And so, this is one of the most often repeated proverbs in both the ancient and modern era. And it found its origin in the Roman theater. And the thing that bugs me about it is that aspiring strongmen and political hacks have been misunderstanding and misusing this quote ever since. The careless and ignorant take this proverb as a license to justify cruel and authoritarian governance, while claiming that they have some kind of ancient wisdom and respectability behind it. And like the Romans would approve of this, which they wouldn't, because they knew better, and they understood that this maxim was not sound political policy, but a potent warning to all those who took power up into their hands. The most skilled Roman politicians of both the Republic and Empire viewed this attitude toward governance with absolute horror. The leaders who ruled by this method were rightly called out as both shameful and, quite frankly, out of their damn minds. Suetonius claims this phrase was always on the lips of Emperor Caligula, and historians are still arguing over whether it was a childhood fever or a love potion gone wrong that did the permanent damage to his brain. So, the fate of Caligula even proves this point. He was murdered by his own Praetorian Guard, and during the classical era, it was widely believed that assassination, murder, and revolution were the natural consequences for engaging in this sort of tyrannical behavior. It cannot be overstated how ardently the Romans hated monarchy, which was synonymous with tyrannical rule. They founded an entire government system. They invented an entire government system to avoid monarchy. And their communal hatred of tyranny and monarchy sustained their republic for over 500 years. Which, by my calculations, which I know other people calculate the dates of the fall of Rome differently and how long it lasted. The Roman Republic lasted longer than Rome's imperial rule. But what I'm kind of in awe of how amazing this play would have been to see. Because this line is so potent. It still resonates with humans today. It's pretty amazing line. Even Cicero, who disagrees with a sentiment vehemently describes the spell it cast over audiences and worked to dispel it with reason, similar to the way parents warn their children to stay away from TikTok challenges if they want to remain alive. So Lucius Accius is the playwright who takes the credit for bringing this phrase into the Roman imagination. And the greatest inspirations for his plays were Greek stories and themes. And thus, this quote comes from the play Atreus, who was an ancient Greek king who had a brother named Thyestes. And if you know the story, Atreus is not a good person. Yeah. And so the play was performed as best as we can estimate around 140 BC. And Cicero writes in De Officium 1:28, when Atreus speaks those lines, they call forth applause, for the sentiment is in keeping with the character. The poets will observe, therefore, amid a great variety of characters, what is suitable and proper for all, even for the bad. But to us, nature has assigned the roles of steadfastness, temperance, self-control, and considerateness of others. Nature also teaches us not to be careless in our behavior towards our fellow men. To clarify Cicero's position further, later in the De Officium, Book 2, Section 7, he writes, but of all motives, none is better adapted to secure influence and hold it fast than love. Nothing is more foreign to that end than fear. Then we discover Accius was not the first to play with this turn of phrase, for Ennius, one of the earliest Roman poets we have in our record, wrote a similar verse that goes, quem metuant Oderint, quem quisque odit perisse expetit. In English, whom they fear they hate, and whom one hates one hopes to see dead. Interesting, that added warning about how being hated makes people wish you were dead, showing that it was a common belief that tyrannical rule would eventually lead to the ruler's untimely death. Cicero takes his maxim of proof of events he sees in his own life, namely the assassination of Julius Caesar. He writes, and we recently discovered, if it was not known before, that no amount of power can withstand the hatred of many. The death of this tyrant whose yoke the state endured under the constraint of armed force, and whom it still obeys more humbly than ever, though he is dead, illustrates the deadly effects of popular hatred. The same lesson is taught by the similar fate of all other despots, of whom practically no one has ever escaped such a death. For fear is but a poor safeguard of lasting power, while affection, on the other hand, may be trusted to keep it safe forever. The other instance of Cicero quoting Accius occurs in the Second Philippic, a famous collection of orations delivered to attack the character of Marcus Antonius, one of Caesar's generals, who took command after his assassination. The same general, in fact, whose historians should probably hold more accountable for Caesar's death. For it was Antonius who enacted the farce that inflamed the enemies of Caesar by placing a crown on his head during a festival. Though Caesar denied the crown, the political damage was done. Cicero tells Antonius, because we see, even in the play, that the man who said, let them hate so long as they fear, was a danger to his very self. Making it plain that Cicero did not see this pithy quote as sound political advice at all. Indeed, It could be argued he viewed it more as a path to suicide than a path to leadership. And even political advisors in imperial Rome found this quote to be obscene. Seneca, court advisor and political tutor to Emperor Nero, calls the maxim accursed, execrabili, and terrible and abominable, dira et abominanda. Seneca's blunt disapproval of this maxim is rather potent, because as a writer, he made avoiding bluntness his number one political career. Yeah, so it was his career as a writer to avoid being blunt in order for him to stay alive. And he was blunt about how horrible this quote was. So he goes on to further castigate the saying in De Ira, Book 1, Section 20. I would not even be loved upon such terms. Do you imagine that this was a saying of a great soul? You are wrong. This is not greatness, but monstrosity. Imanitas is the Latin word. Again, in De Clementia, Book 1, Section 12, he explains, this attitude has cast so many headlong from their thrones, not knowing how frantic men become when their hatred becomes excessive, for a moderate amount of fear restrains men. But a constant and keen apprehension of the worst tortures rouse up even the most groveling spirits to deeds of reckless courage and causes them to hesitate at nothing. Even the political theorist Niccolo Machiavelli, who famously wrote in his work The Prince that one ought to be both feared and loved, but as it is difficult for the two to go together, it is much safer to be feared than loved, agrees that one must avoid being hated at all costs. He says, still, a prince should make himself feared in such a way that if he does not gain love, he at any rate avoids hatred. I feel like when you have Cicero, Seneca, and Machiavelli all agreeing on a political principle, it would be wise to heed the advice. While reveling in the hatred of your countrymen may be a fun fantasy to enact on stage, in the real world such an attitude creates real consequences. In a world where hatred is monetized, we must not forget exactly how dangerous it is. St. Augustine wrote, Ira festuca est odium trabes est. Anger is the branch, hatred the trunk. Hatred is an infestation that will destroy the entire orchard. So, it is time to prune our branches. A sane populace should stand united in renouncing the propagators of hatred as mad men who have lost touch with reason and are a danger to themselves.